Alright guys, my name is MetaGoblin. Today just having a bit of a quick informal discussion about some of my big concerns about the release of Classic TBC. Not just the launch of a game, but the whole experience of the expansion, really. So I've got 5 major points to go through. My first point, strangely, isn't a point that's really criticising Blizzard in any way. It's actually criticising the Legacy Classic community as a whole, because I think there's a real risk of a community just ruining the game for themselves and ruining it for everyone else by try-harding so much that they try-hard the absolute fun out of the game. This is because there are a number of people in the Classic community who have an extremely elitist attitude towards the game, and I think a lot of issues are going to pop up, like people absolutely demanding that people optimize the absolute best crafted gear when it comes to raiding, which for a lot of people is going to put a lot of demand on people, because crafting the best in slot crafted gear, for instance Spell Strike, Frozen Shadow Weave and items like that, it's going to be very expensive and time consuming, and a lot of people just cannot commit that amount of time to the game, me included, to be honest. And even if everyone in their raid group is going to get the absolute best pre-base gear, it's going to totally trivialise the actual raid content. We'll talk a little bit more about that in my second point. But the second point on this topic that I have is overusing drums. So in TBC there's an item that can be unlocked if you have your level working high enough, called the drum. There are a number of different versions of it, but people are mainly going to be using the drums of battle. As you can see here, use increases melee and range and spell haste rating on nearby party members by 80, lasts 30 seconds. So what this is essentially a bloodlust or heroism in a bottle. You can use it an infinite amount of times. It affects everyone else in the party, and what top guilds did back in the day is just cycle everyone using drums of battle. And obviously it actually requires you to have level working at level 350 for you to actually use them, which means that it's almost mandatory if you're in a serious guild to level up level working as your secondary profession all the way up to 350, and it totally limits what professions that, other professions that you may want. Say for instance you have tailoring, you may also want enchanting, you may have blacksmithing, you may also want mining to make your blacksmithing experience a little simpler, or you may want alchemy and jewel crafting to make loads of money, but you won't have that freedom to have any profession you want, because you will have to have level working. And if everyone actually pulls up the socks and goes through the effort to do this, again it's going to massively trivialise the content and make it too easy. The raiding content is probably already going to be too easy anyway, and optimizations like this just are totally unnecessary, to be honest. And the same comes to picking classes. People are going to be overusing shamans, warlock and hunters, who are like the top 3 best classes in TBC. What would be really bad is if raid compositions just focus on over-recruiting shamans, warlock and hunters, and then not bring in the other classes, like not bring in melee classes, and not bring in more of the niche classes like a Ret Paladin, Shadow Priest, Boomkin, Feral Druid and all this, and have a bit this huge stigma like there is currently in Classic WoW for niche specs, towards all of these niche specs, which is totally unnecessary. I mean, you don't need to totally optimize your raid composition. I mean, you can to a certain extent, but I just really don't think there's that much of a point, because the raid content is going to be pretty easy. And what it's going to do is just going to create a very divided community where everyone just has to play Warlock and Hunter and Mage and a few other classes, and people will feel kind of like under pressure to obviously roll those classes and won't feel the freedom to roll different specs like all of the niche specs, which overall is just going to make the game much more boring, because even if you want to play a Warlock already, you're just going to see everyone else playing Warlock and Hunters around and Mages, and you're not going to see any of these interesting specs around, and people aren't going to play them. There's just going to be less diversity in the whole game as a whole. This issue is going to be the biggest when it comes to an Alliance Ret Paladin, because a lot of people obviously know by now that a Blood Elf Ret Paladin is very superior to any Alliance Paladin. So I wouldn't be surprised if you could even play the entire game and never see a Alliance Rep Paladin, unless they've like re-rolled from a Holy Paladin out of boredom after they've done a lot of raiding, because they will just be that rare. Like, the only guy who would be playing Alliance Paladin would be that S-Fan guy on Twitch. It's actually motivated me to possibly consider making my own guild where I prioritize recruiting niche specs over the, you know, overpowered specs in TBC, because I think with that kind of mentality you may actually make the raid content more challenging, because you have less overpowered specs and you have more Rep Paladins, like maybe like 3 Rep Paladins rather than having you know, 3 Warlocks. You may actually make the content challenging again, so, you know, pay attention to that in the future. I might make a post about it if Classic TBC is ever launched, or we may do something with it. But anyway, another thing is when it comes to race choice for PvP, because a lot of people, again, the community is massively divided on this issue, because a lot of the hardcore PvP players have gone to roll Horde, and a lot more people are already playing Horde, and not a lot of the PvP players are playing Alliance. There is obviously some, but the Horde racials are obviously more superior to the Alliance racials, and this issue is going to get even worse, because the battleground queues aren't going to fix if especially if the Classic servers automatically roll onto TBC servers, because the population issue is already there. But I think it's just going to get even worse in Classic TBC, because people care a lot more about how good they're going to be in PvP, because there's actually a competitive environment to test their skill in, and that's obviously the arena. We have to push rating, get ranks, get cool mounts and all that kind of thing, so people will care about it a lot more, which will push more and more people to re-roll from Alliance to Horde and divide the community even more. Anyway, let's move on to my second point, where we're going to talk about raiding particularly. So my worry really is that TBC isn't going to launch with time-gated content. This would be a big change, obviously, to the original TBC, because not many people know this, but TBC actually launched with Karazhan, Gruul's Lair, Magfarodon's Lair, Tempest Keep, and the Battle for Might and Hyjal. They were available at launch, because back in 2008 or 2007, developers actually made games instead of making like demos with a £50 season DLC pass. You know, you actually got content in your games that would keep you busy for a very long time. Imagine that amount of raids being launched like in Shadowlands, or, you know, any retail expansion. It's just totally unconceivable, really. I think this was largely because they started development on Karazhan and Outland, and actually intended it to be a patch in vanilla, and then later released it as an expansion. I think that's the reason why you have so many raids available at launch. I think Battle for Might and Hyjal was originally going to be in vanilla along with Karazhan, so that's probably why there were so many raids released at launch. But still, that is a lot of people to, you know, a lot of content to keep people busy. Now the reason why it actually took people so long to get to Battle for Might and Hyjal and actually clear all the content, even on the like world first guilds, is because back then they were playing on more difficult hardware where they probably couldn't even get 60 FPS. Voice communication software was terrible, and people didn't know all of the like best in slot gear, best in slot talents, and basically didn't know how to optimize absolutely every little hairline out of their characters to get the bait, you know, to be the most effective in raids. So that's why the content took a while to actually get fully cleared in retail TBC. But if you know, Classic TBC launches tomorrow, I wouldn't be very surprised if all of this content is cleared within a month, maybe even 2 weeks if guilds are taking it that seriously, because I doubt that Blizzard are going to overtune the raids in any way to make it more difficult, and people are just going to rush this content and get all of that fat gear very, very quickly, because people know all the tactics by heart. You have private server guilds who have been practicing for years and years on and off different servers that have been released. People are going to clear this content ridiculously quickly, and that definitely presents an issue, because those try-hard players will get all the powerful, you know, loot before everyone else, and a lot of this powerful loot can actually be used in a PvP environment like Arena, and then obviously create a massive unfair advantage for everyone who try hard at the raids. An example would be Storm Herald, which you you know, people are going to be able to make Storm Herald very early because they're going to get into SSC very early, get their Nether Vortexes, and Storm Herald is an extremely overpowered two-handed mace for Warrior, which just makes them steamroll in PvP because it's such a slow weapon and obviously scales with all of their abilities. And obviously legendaries too, like all of the legendaries just drop in TBC. There's no like massive gold requirement for you to get them, they literally just drop. So if you get lucky and you get a legendary, again, that's going to put you at a massive advantage in PvP because you can equip the Warglaives in PvP, and that is something that should definitely be banned. Like, you shouldn't be able to equip any legendaries in Arena. Another issue I can see with people not time gating the content, you know, you've got 4 raids available at launch, 4 raids that are going to have to be farmed, and that's going to be a huge demand on players to be active, because the vast majority of the classic community, the people who have nostalgia for this game, the people who return to playing it, they're not playing retail anymore because they don't have the time. And a lot of people, you know, they played retail TBC when they were young and had infinite amounts of time because they were at school or university. But now, because they have like full-time jobs, they have families, they're going to have a lot less time. You know, they might even have children. So a lot of the players just aren't going to have the time for classic TBC. They're not going to have the time to be clearing that amount of raids all at once. I mean, I definitely won't have enough time for that amount of raiding, because there probably have to be about 4 good raid nights per week to keep all the content on farm, and I simply do not have the time for that, to be honest, and I don't think a lot of people will either. Which means it's going to be difficult for a lot of people to actually get into guilds, because there may only be serious hardcore guilds recruiting on your server, and that's the only option that you have to go with, but you cannot commit to their raid nights, you know, 4 times a week, and that will... Basically, I think it will mean that a lot of people will just be totally guildless and not have a community to go and clear the content with and have to rely on pugging and stuff like that, which is obviously a terrible experience. And what will inevitably happen when people are doing these raids over and over, 4 raid nights a week, is people are just going to get totally burnt out and bored of the game. That's inevitably going to happen, and there's going to be a huge population drop-off. Like, there was a population drop-off with Classic. The main reason why that happened is because people forgot how difficult it was. Well, not how difficult, but, well, yeah, how difficult and how long it took to actually get to level 60. And a lot of people couldn't commit. Like, I have a couple of friends who did play at launch who didn't even get to level 60. You know, they just didn't have the time for it. And they didn't have the patience for it, which is fair enough, right? That's a kind of, that's how our, it's basically how our mindsets and our brains have kind of developed over the past decade or so. I think we are extremely more impatient as a society, but anyway, I'm getting way too philosophical there. But yeah, I can definitely see a huge population drop-off happening, you know, a month into the classic TBC launch. The original TBC players did take it at a steady pace, right? It's why it took a while for Tempest Keep and Battle for Mount Hyjal to be defeated, obviously partly because the mechanics were so difficult to actually deal with back then. But I just can't see the try-hard elitist community taking their time with this. They will clear the content as fast as humanly possible and create all of these PvP imbalances and just all of these massive issues that will come on alongside it. So I definitely think at launch only Karazhan, Gruzlair and Magfaradons should be available, and then Tempest Keep gets released after that, and then Battle for Mount Hyjal a little bit after that. Because if you think about it, it would actually be a better way to do things, because it would be an easier way to keep content rolling out quickly so people don't get bored of the game or burnt out playing, you know, the original raids. If we release raids steadily, then yeah, people would just stay around and they'll be more invested in the game, because they won't get totally burnt out clearing the content and feel like they don't have to play the game anymore, and will be sitting in anticipation of a next raid coming out. But if all these raids come out, we're all gonna have to wait ages, and I mean ages, for all of the other raids to come out. However, I wouldn't have such an issue with all of the raids being released at launch if the raids weren't too easy, right? Which leads me on to my third point. Private servers always tune the raids, because otherwise people would just clear it too fast and people would stop playing the server, right? But if Blizzard actually made the effort to make, for instance, Tempest Keep extremely, and I mean extremely difficult without being fully decked out in tier 4 gear, then I wouldn't have an issue with it. I would actually encourage Blizzard to actually release all of the raids at launch if the raids are going to be extremely difficult, or if tier 5 raids are going to be extremely difficult and impossible to do in, you know, without having been equipped in Karazhan and Guril's gear and stuff like that. So I wouldn't have an issue with it then, because you imagine, you know, you start playing Classic TBC, you're just going to have loads of things to do at launch. You're going to have loads of raids to do, you know, to go with, and you won't have to wait around for a new raid being released. You can just jump into the next raid. Now I think if the raids are very difficult, then the state of progression will be very steady, and that will be good. But I doubt that's going to happen. I doubt it's going to happen because, obviously, like I said before, we have better hardware now, we have better understanding of optimizing our characters. We just know how to defeat these raids very quickly, and that's as simple as that, really. The raids now on private servers do not present much of a challenge unless they are massively overtuned. And I think if Classic TBC launches, yeah, this content is just going to get cleared so quickly, and that'll be, you know, quite a shame. I just think the combination of the try-hard elitist players and the raids being too easy because they're undertuned for the different level of skill that players have now and their hardware, then it's just going to totally ruin the game, in all honesty. I think they can either do two things, right? They either need to make the raids harder or have a faster release schedule for the whole expansion. You know, there's actually a private server out there called Frostmourne. It's a Wrath of the Lich King server that releases all of the content from Wrath of the Lich King in the space of a year. So content gets released every 3 months. You always have something to do on the server because of a fast release of all the content, and I think it's the best way to basically experience the Legacy experience, because, again, like I said before, we are just simply better at playing the game now, so we are going to get burnt out on board unless content is being released faster. So if the whole of Classic TBC's content is released within a space of a year, then this wouldn't be so much of an issue, because it will just keep people, you know, invested and interested in the game. I mean, already with Classic WoW, I do feel that the content has released faster than it did in Vanilla, and I think that is just a necessary step that Blizzard has to take in response to how more skilled people are these days. It's straightforward. Anyway, let's move on to my fourth point. It's just a quick one, really. A lot of people are talking about it in the community, and I'm on the fence about it, to be honest, but I think a lot of people when Classic TBC launches are going to have too much gold, right? And they can use their gold to exploit the economy by buying all the best in-slot items like gems, enchants, tailoring enchants particularly, and then just totally drive up the prices and potentially just totally ruin the economy. You know, and people... The reason why this has happened is because people know how to farm immense amounts of gold in Classic and totally exploit the fact that there's no AoE cap and do crazy dungeon pulls, and Blizzard haven't done anything to fix that issue. People are just farming an immense amount of gold, and they're going to run into TBC with loads of gold. People are suggesting that all of the gold should be totally reset to 0, which is a little bit crazy in my opinion, or having a gold cap or something like that. I don't really know, to be honest. I think the solution really brings me on to my fifth point. I will talk about the solution in my fifth point, because I think there should be alternative servers when Classic TBC is launched, depending on what kind of game you actually want to play. So I think there should be fresh server options where people level up from level 1 all the way to level 70, and I think there should be servers for people who don't have a time for that, which is fair enough, who want to just continue on their current characters into TBC. And I think the whole system of it should change, really, because I think obviously now we have Classic WoW in the launcher, but I really hate how it's like a drop down menu from Retail World of Warcraft. I think what needs to happen is there needs to be a totally new IP, and we need to call it Legacy World of Warcraft. It needs its own section on the Battle.net launcher, and when you go to Legacy World of Warcraft, you have the whole game, almost a little bit like the Master Chief Collection. You know, in the Master Chief Collection you can download, you know, Halo 1, Halo 2, Halo 3, like a system a little bit like that. You can download all the expansions that you want, you log in, and then when you go to the server list you have a number of different servers that you can go on. So first of all, you can play on fresh Classic servers if you want to, totally fresh 0 to 1 Classic servers being released every year or so. Then you can also play on the old Classic WoW servers that everyone's characters are on. You can play on fresh TBC servers, and you can play on TBC continued servers. And then you can also play on possibly, you know, Wrath of Lich King servers. And then maybe, crazy idea, but you could even have like a server that is like a fast progression server. So you have to complete the entirety of, only a couple servers should have this for really try-hard elitist players that are out there, because obviously there's a lot of them out there, where they have to complete the entirety of Classic WoW content under 6 months. You log in and you have to complete all the way from Molten Core to Naxxramas in 6 months, and then after those 6 months you progress into the TBC, and you have to complete all of the TBC content in 6 months. And yeah, just have really cool, extremely fast, around the world progression servers like that for all of the elitist players. Have different servers that cater to different people and different players. And lastly, I'm going to finish off with some other kind of server issues. One of the things I can definitely anticipate happening is Blizzard simply not releasing enough servers for Classic TBC, whether they release fresh ones or continue the current Classic servers. I don't think they'll release enough. There won't be enough. The population will be too high, the server queues will be too high, and it'll just be like Classic WoW launch. It will be absolutely terrible. I think there'll be, obviously, the huge faction imbalances that are currently in the game are going to be a huge issue if the Classic WoW servers continue to just progress into TBC servers. Those issues have to be fixed. I came up with a solution to the idea. So servers like, I'm pretty sure it's called Flamelash, which is a 99% horde populated server. I think what should happen is the server should be totally shut down, and the horde population get free transfers to disperse amongst all of the other realms, right? And then when a certain realm, for instance, has had about 100 transfers or 200 transfers from a certain amount of players, well, a certain amount of accounts from Flamelash to a particular server, then there's like a cap, and you can't transfer to that server anymore. So what guilds could do is have a coalition in a Discord saying, right, we're going onto this server, we're going onto that server, we're going onto that server, yada yada, and then all of the guilds can, you know, evenly disperse amongst all of the other realms, right? And it's the same for the Alliance side too. Obviously the issue with that is you are killing a server, you are killing the community on that server, and that is a bit, you know, a little bit of an issue. But again, it's kind of like a necessary evil to fix these huge imbalance issues. But really, it's like a double-edged sword, really, because I know a lot of people who play on these servers aren't actually that bothered about the huge imbalance. But me personally, I think I would be pretty bothered by it. But anyway, I think that's pretty much all I have to talk about. Obviously that was a little bit of a crazy idea to finish off on, but I think something like that obviously would fix the faction imbalance issues. But I think it's, honestly I think it's a losing battle, because again, when arenas come out, people are going to try hard playing Horde because of all the better racials like Will of the Forsaken, and stuff like that. I mean, obviously can't remove it because that would be totally controversial, but yeah, I don't think the faction imbalances are going to be fixed. I don't think there's any way to solve that issue. I think it is still kind of a losing battle, to be honest. There's simply just going to be more people playing Horde, and there's nothing that we can really do about it. Apart from faction queues as well, private servers have actually started introducing a faction queue idea and has been working on a few private servers. So they should also do a system like that too, in my opinion. But anyway, that's where I'm going to end the video there, guys. My name is MetaGoblin. To the next video. Ciao.